Let us prepare ourselves. Justin, can you pull these down just a bit?
Yeah.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And now your ears. I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
And just put your hand over your heart. Extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that consciousness is cause. It's a very basic metaphysical spiritual truth. Consciousness is cause. It's what drives our lives to happen. And so for those of you who are visiting today, let me just say what consciousness is: the sum total of our thinking and our beliefs. That thinking and beliefs that have withstood the test of time, that have withstood the test of the awfulizers. You know, those beliefs that you hold, I'm going to make something of myself, I'm a success, and somebody comes along and says, who do you think you are? Well, that thought that says, I still believe I'm going to make something of myself. I still believe I'm going to success. That's consciousness thinking in our lives. That consciousness, that those thoughts and beliefs that withstand evidence, that so-called evidence that is out there, that is reflecting back to us that we're not going to succeed, but we know we are in any way. We believe that. That's consciousness thinking. But consciousness is the sum total of all of our thoughts, even those thoughts that we unfortunately have not withstood the test of the awfulizers. Those thoughts that have not withstood the well-meaning liars in our life who said we're too much of this or we're too much of that, or we're not going to be able to make it in this life. We're not capable of it. We're less than. They tried to define us as less than. If we buy that, if we let it in, those become driving thoughts also. And they too will drive our life. They too will take us into our next steps in our lives. Our work in this entire lifetime is to begin to have those affirmative beliefs, those beliefs that we are successful, that God is on our side, to take those beliefs and make them bigger. And not to fight with the lying beliefs, but to let them slip away, as Emerson said, into the bloated nothingness from which they came. Because if we can put enough good, positive, life-affirming ideas into our consciousness, there's not enough room for the other ones. They just can't get in. They have to stay out. Well, we're in a series right now, and we're ending it today. We've spent a little time on this series. This series based on the book, The 10 Things to Do When Your Life Falls Apart, an emotional and spiritual handbook. And what we've done is, because here's what we know in this church, that there is a spiritual solution for every one of life's problems. We're not a church that brings you in here and tries to teach you how to memorize scripture, whether it's from the Bible or the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita or any other spiritual book. We want you to know about them. We want you to learn from them. But our job isn't to make you try and repeat them. Our job is to help you understand that there is a spiritual solution that can be found in all of those books that will solve any of life's problems, and even in little books like this. See, we make our spirituality so challenging and so complicated, but it's actually very simple. And she's come up with 10 simple things to do when our life is falling apart. Now, I hope your life never falls apart in the future, but I suspect you've had at least one experience of that, of feeling like your life is falling apart. Like feeling like you're in such a big mess you don't know how to get out of the quagmire. This book, if we can keep it close to us, if we can refer to it in those periods, we can actually have some steps to bring us out of the mess in our life. So just for a quick review, we've talked about the first 7 things. The first one was learn to cry your heart out. You gotta learn how to cry your heart out if you want to get out of your mess. Can't stuff stuff down. Face your default settings. So you're not always running to the refrigerator or the bar every time your life starts to fall apart. Learn to do something different. Learn how to let go. Learn how to remember who you've always been. Learn how to persist. Learn how to integrate your loss. Those are the ones that we've done so far. And you can get those on the YouTube channel on the front of your bulletin and just go back and review them, or if you're just joining us today, you can catch up with us. Because today we're going to jump right into the seventh one, which is begin to live simply. Begin to learn how to live simply. Now this is a good follow-up to let go. Let go is an action. We already talked about that. You have to let go of people. You have to let go of situations. You have to let go of behaviors. But living simply is more than that. It's a commitment to a lifestyle. And it's attention to that lifestyle after you make that commitment. Now be clear here. I am not talking about living as a miser. I am not talking about living in that frugal way that we know some people live, where they just won't part with a dime. My father was a little bit like that. You know, he just couldn't part with a dime. That's not what I'm talking about, and that's not what this church actually teaches. Living frugally, living with little can be a choice, and it's an honorable choice. As long as you're not subjecting other people to your living frugally, it's an honorable choice. But a lot of us have lived, and I have myself, lived in that frugal time where you don't have anything, and it wasn't by choice at all. I was not making a choice to live frugally. I didn't understand the laws of abundance. I hadn't come to a church like this and really studied what prosperity is and how to get prosperous in my life. I hadn't done that spiritual study to know how to do that. And so I was constantly worried. I was worried how I was going to pay the rent. I was worried about if I'd have enough gas money to get to the car, to get to work. I was worried about if I'd have enough food to eat at the end of the month. That's the kind of frugality that's not a choice, and that's not what we're talking about here today. There is nothing romantic about living in lack. There is nothing spiritual about living in lack. There is nothing religious about living in lack. Now, if those of you who grew up like I did and grew up Catholic, you might have gotten this twisted. So let me say it again. There is nothing spiritual or religious about living in lack. What we want to begin to do, though, is to know that living simply is a powerful, powerful way to live. And I'm not talking about just living simply on the physical realm. I'm also talking about living simply in your mental state. And living simply, surrendering and living simply. See, living simply is the paring away of stuff, the paring away of obligations, the paring away of expectations, and sometimes the paring away of people. The people who are not serving you anymore in your life. And making space in your heart, making space in your brain, making space in your house, and to begin to remember that the pleasures in life don't usually cost piles of money. And being mindful that we don't need to be possessed by our possessions. I love that line in this book. We don't need to be possessed by our possessions. So if the possessions go away, we don't go away with them in our life. Living simply can also be of great help to Great Mother. We need to live more simply on this planet. Do you know that every American generates 4 pounds of garbage every single day? And there are 318 million of us on this planet, each generating 4 pounds of garbage every day. Now, I haven't done the math, but that's a lot of garbage. It's a lot of millions of pounds of garbage every single day in this life. And it's no wonder that we overconsume sometimes. Each American, I love this statistic in this book, every single person in the United States gets 3,000 messages of advertisement every day. Every day! 3,000 messages. And so it's hard. I mean, you go into a store and it's hard not to consume sometimes stuff that you don't need. We need to be mindful about consuming. Donna and I just got a new puppy. And so we've been spending a lot of time in pet stores. And I'm telling you, it's hard. You have to, oh, a sweater. Maybe we should get her a sweater. And now they even have Halloween costumes for your pet. And I wanted one. Living simply is a spiritual practice, and we have to keep mindful to keep that going in our lives. She also says in this book that collectively, 9 billion collectively Americans have $9 billion of credit card debt. $9 billion of credit card debt collectively in this country. So living simply would not only help us be happier, I think, but it would also help Great Mother Earth if we're willing to do that. So the eighth thing we just talked about wasn't seventh, it was eighth. Begin to live simply. The ninth thing is, if your life is falling apart, go where the love is. Go where the love is. And if when your life is falling apart, you can keep bitterness out of your life, if you can stay away from bitterness, and that's a hard thing to do. When you're going through an ugly divorce, or when you're going through being fired at work, or some other reason your life feels like it's falling apart, it's easy to fall into bitterness. But if we can use our spiritual head, our spiritual life, to keep out of bitterness, it's easy to go where the love is, because the love is all around. And when we're not bitter, we can begin to see it. It's everywhere. Everywhere we go, there are expressions of love. Many of you have heard me tell the story before. Years ago, I went to a public swimming pool. And I was at this pool. It was crowded. It was a hot day. It was really crowded. And I had my only place for my little chair, my little lawn chair, was right near the diving board. And so I was watching these kids. They were darling little boys. They were 8 or 10 years old, and there were 4 or 5 of them. And they were doing somersaults, and they were clearly cool dudes. You know, they had the little cool dude trunks and little cool dude haircut, cool dude talk, you know. And I was just enjoying the heck out of watching them. And then my attention went just a little bit farther down, and I saw this mother and another little boy, also about 8 years old, at the edge of the deep end. And this little boy clearly had Down syndrome. And his little toes were over the edge of the pool, and his mother was sitting next to him, and she was trying to get him to jump in the pool. And she was insistent about it. She kept saying, honey, jump in the pool. Come on, you can jump in. You can do it. You come right back up. It'll be fun. You'll love it. And she kept it up and kept it up. Now, before we judge this mother, all of us who are parents have done something that stupid with our children when we wanted them to do something, didn't we? And so she was getting frustrated because he wouldn't jump in the pool. And so finally she brought out the big guns. And she said, Billy, you don't want me to tell Daddy what a big baby you are, do you? And the little boy started to cry, and he didn't move. He just sat right there. Well, unbeknownst to me, here come the 3 cool dudes. And they're coming, and I'm thinking, oh God, they're going to make fun of him. You know, because I've heard all those stories about how they treat kids who have Down syndrome. None of that happened. They came up, and without any condescension, without any meanness, they said, come on, guy, you can do it. You can, here, let's just jump in. And one of them would jump in to show how he could come back up, and they showed him how to hold his legs when he jumped in, and they just talked to him, and they made him one of him, and finally, he still couldn't do it. He was just shaking. And so finally, one of the cool dudes held his hand and said, let's do it together. And they jumped in together. You know, and I'd like to say the biggest part of that story was that little Down syndrome boy who had a smile just broke across his face when he knew he didn't die. He came up. It just filled my heart. But what really filled my heart were the three cool dudes. And just as quick as they came, they went back to the diving board and started doing somersaults and all that stuff. Love is all around us. We just have to be open to it. We just have to begin to look for it in our life. The title of this chapter, this wisdom, is to go where the love is. I would add another word. I would say, go where the love is needed. You know, very often when our life is falling apart, we of course go to where the love is, our family perhaps, or our best friend perhaps, or even a counselor that we pay. We know we're paying them, but we know they love us. And so we go there and we get the love there. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But I think another good thing is at the very time when our life is hitting bottom, when a skids is on that life, that's when we go out and we share it with somebody else who needs us more. Go where the love is needed in our life. That's what Brenda did when she pulled all that together. She took our love and took it where it's needed. That's what that tree is all about, is taking where the love is needed. That's why we're bringing Gabby. Yeah. That's why we're joining area congregations together, to take the love where it is needed so that we can all flourish in this life. In short, what we're doing here is we're making the circle bigger. You know, we stop that obsession. I don't know about you, but when my life is falling apart, I become obsessed with myself. Don't you? Yeah, we all do. We become obsessed. And when we take it out, then that obsession of what we need, what we want, what we desire, what they did, who we are, all that begins to go away. And we make the circle of love even bigger. In the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says, in order to keep it, you have to give it away. And what they're talking about, of course, is sobriety. But love, it's the same thing. In order to keep love, you can give it away and have it even in an even greater way than we have it right now. The final one is choose to live in the light of the Spirit. Choose to live in the light of the Spirit. You are a spiritual inspiration. There's no end of thanks that I can give. I release this word into the lawn, together we say, and so it is.